You can on your video, madam. Yeah.
Thank you. Myself, Surekha, lecturer in Physics, Government Degree College, Pittapuram. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Upendra Rao, sir. He is one of the greatest resource persons of today international webinar conducted by Government Degree College, Pittapuram. Dr. Upendra Rao, sir. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Dr. Upendra Rao graduated in pharmacy from Usmania University, Hyderabad, and PG in pharmacy from JNTU, Hyderabad. He is the PhD from IASER, Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Bhopal. At present, Dr. Upendra Rao sir is the postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Pediatrics, Penn State College of Medicine, Hershey, USA. He is now working in the topic regulation of chromatin architecture in hematopoiesis and leukemia. Dr. Upendra Rao sir, up to 25 international publications with an I-10 index of 12. His research interests include biochemistry, cell biology, cancer biology, drug design, epidemics, and chromatin regulation, molecular pharmacology, and toxicology. Dr. Upendra served as a peer reviewer for more than 50 manuscripts from 25 international journals of repute, including from Springer Nature Journals, Quarantine Journals, Taylor Francis Group, Austrian Publications Limited, and Science Domain International Publishing Journals. Dr. Upendra was recipient of Conference Reviewer for Young Scientist Grant by organizers of 27th International Conference on Yeast Genetics and Molecular Biology, Italy, 2015. And also recipient of Senior Research Fellowship from Ministry of Human Resources and Development, International Travel Support Grant from DPT, CICS Government of India. Awarded prestigious Pratibha Award by Government of Andhra Pradesh, India for securing highest marks in secondary school at district level selected. Thank you, sir, for giving this opportunity.
Thank you.
It's really a wonderful profile, Dr. Upendra.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the nice.
In the future, we would like to see you as scientist there in the US.
Sure.
Or in your motherland.
I'm trying to back home, like motherland.
That's good.
Yeah.
To serve your motherland.
Sure. I'm just getting expertise here now.
Dr. Upendra will take us through drug development and recent advances in COVID treatment.
Good evening, everyone. Today, my title of topic is drug development and repurposing and current advancements in the treatment of COVID-19. So basically, today's my topic includes mainly the contents of my presentation includes defining and introducing to you the drug designing and development pipeline, as well as how the drug repurposing and what are the examples that were already established earlier, and how this approach can be used to combat the pandemic. So we will also introduce the SARS-CoV-2, like the COVID-19, and what are the main symptoms and what are the strategies that we can combat this virus. And also, lastly, I will talk and update about the repurposing of COVID-19 with available drugs and current advancements that are occurring in the COVID-19 treatment. So in case of drug designing and development, this is it's a flow, like it's a very big process which takes several years to get one drug approved and it enters into the market. So if it comes to the pipeline, like it is a several step process as shown here. So it starts with identifying a drug target that can be efficiently used for treating some diseases. And then later on, the next step followed is hit identification. And after the identification of the hit for the development of the drugs, we will use the lead optimization method to get the drug, like suitable into the human body, and we will optimize the lead so that we can get a very efficient and less toxic drugs. And then these moieties will be tested in the preclinical trials, mostly in the in vitro in the lab system as well as in the mouse models. And later on, once we get sufficient results and good outcome from the preclinical trials, the next stage will be the clinical trials in the human beings. And once it got found to be safe and uh, efficient in the humans, then it will go to the drug approval process. And mainly the regulatory authorities will take over this drug approval process and then release it into the market. So it looks quite simple, but when it comes to the total pipeline, how it takes, how long, and how much costly it is to develop one drug and bring it into the market. So as you can see here, it has a several step process as indicated earlier. So it takes almost 10 to 15 years, more than that, to get a one drug which is approved and should be entered into the market for the human use. So as I said, the first initial stage has to be designing the drug and optimizing it, so that the first initial 3 to 4 phases like takes to 7 to 7 years, close to 7 years, to identify a target which is good efficient for focusing for the development of a drug. And then we'll identify lead molecules that can target our interest, and then it will enter into the optimization and then preclinical trials, which takes almost 1 to 2 years again. And the clinical trials are already explained by Dr. Eric previously. It has a 4 phases totally, but phase 1 starts with a very small number of humans to be tested for the its safety in the human patients in the small level. Once it get into the past, and then we enter into the next phase, that is phase 2, which will occur in good number of patients, like more than 100 to several thousand patients, to find its efficacy in the humans. And later on, once it get a sufficient results and encouraging results, it will enter into the phase 3. It will be multi-center trials, like it will take in several parts and several centers and several patients, like several thousands of patients, and to see its efficacy and its safety. Sorry. And once these drug found to be effective and safe for the use, as I said, as previously Dr. Eric said, it will take almost 3 to 4 years to complete the phase 3 trials in multi-center level before the approval. So the approval, like in the phase 4, like it is again the drug will be under surveillance in the market, like, even after entering into the market. What are the side effects and new symptoms and new adverse effects are reporting to the doctors, and also new drug interactions with already available drugs, what kind of adverse drug reactions are happening, and all those reporting will be done. And then whether drug will be retracted back if it is having very more severe adverse effects which are not seen in the phase 3 trials, and drug will be continued if it is like having a good safety and efficacy. So this is a process, like it's almost a very long process of doing more than 15 years of research to launch one drug into the market. So first of all, like as I said, the main part of the drug development is identifying the target, which is has to be validated, and it has to be selected for its efficiency. So this will be like, people have several approaches for identifying good target, which is based on its disease relevance, as well as, and also its existence in the experimental models. And also these people also compare the expression of the target in the gene level and protein level in different expression patterns in the disease conditions as well as healthy conditions. And also people use the compound set, like several compounds, to target these targets, and found to be effective in the try to find the predictivity analysis so that the target validation can be done. Uh, and this can be done by several professionals, like based on the literature, as well as some computer aided drug designing, like the using artificial intelligence technology to get a more knowledge about the target and its suitability for the being selected as a target for drug development. So this is a slide where I'm talking about in general, like the key therapeutic areas have several number of targets. Like if you talk about one diabetes, like there are 190 targets that can be used as a druggable candidate. So one disease has several number of targets can be selected for the developing a new drug approaches. So this is a chart showing the number of associated targets in each disease. So this indicates that one disease can have multiple druggable targets, and also some of them can share the similar targets, such as like some proteins which are some targets which are common in bacterial infections can be common in infection with HIV, such as like immune boosters and all can be used, and several cancers can share some of the common targets which can be used like vice versa. So generally, when you see the target-based drug discovery, as per the literature, we think of targeting something like R1 and R4 proteins as a like two drug molecules, like drug 1 and drug 2. We think that something it should work as some pathway, something like this. But what we don't know is the reality. The the cellular process is like very complex. We don't know how the real picture is. So if you see the real picture, like in the cell, it could be like something more complex, and that which will not predictable in the normal the discovery process. So we should be more careful, and we'll be looking at more of those effects on these molecules and the side effects and the safety, all those things. That's why the study takes almost several years to approve a drug, because we thought something else, but the real picture is different. And once it enters into the system, it can have multiple targets and it has a wide variety of reactions in the system. So that's why the process of approving a drug is very complex and very systematic, so that we will not face any adverse reactions later on. So the phenotypic observations like that we do is, like, as I said, some of the diseases have multiple targets, and some of them will be common in different diseases. So some of this pilot study, they have screened almost the profile 400 compounds to show new beneficial biology for the existing compounds. So out of them, 30% of them have showed uses for the existing drugs. So up to 90% of the new indications are driven by on-target activities. So as I said, biology is complex and there is a tremendous amount that has not understood. So the phenotypic screening provides an opportunity to identify new clinically relevant uses of existing molecules driven by action on known molecular targets. So this kind of approach is called as drug repurposing. So that is what, like, the phenotypic screening, like when you know what kind of phenotypes some disease has and what are the common diseases previously once the drugs are approved, and which can be used in an alternative to the existing molecules can be used for the new uses in the system. So I will be introducing the drug repurposing technology. Like this technique is emerged in 2004. So this can be defined like drug repurposing, also referred to as drug repositioning, also reprofiling, redirecting, or switching, like etc. Like, so it is one of the repurposing is the use of an active ingredient in an indication other than the one for which it was initially marketed. So it is a growing trend and appears to have like very recent emerging, like from last 15 to 16 years. The first examples of successful drug repurposing mainly came about through something like aspirin and thalidomide and sildenafil or dimethyl fumarate. So drug repurposing relies on mainly two scientific bases. One is the discovery through human genome elucidation that some diseases share sometimes common biological targets. So as I said in the previously, so they have one disease can have multiple targets, biological targets, and these can be common different between different diseases. So if they have some common biological targets. So we can use the drug which is approved for one condition can be tested in some other new disease. And also the concept of pleiotropic drugs, like some drugs have multiple effects, like as you said, like the target based drug designing, sometimes we thought the drug can have one target, but when it enters into the system, it may have more than one target in the biological system. So these kind of pleiotropic drugs can be useful for the repurposing approach and can be used for a new condition. So some of the classical examples of drug repurposing. So one of such molecule is aspirin, that we all know very well. That is a over-the-counter medicine. So this was approved in 1899 as an analgesic, and which was repurposed in 1980s as an antiplatelet aggregation drug because of its effects on some of the known targets. And recently, the second repurposing of this aspirin can be done in sooner as an anti-cancer drug. There are some studies are already proving its efficiency as an anti-cancer drug. And another drug of choice like is a thalidomide, which was in 1962 World Health Organization banned the thalidomide because of its teratogenicity and severe adverse effects on the pregnant women. But later on in 1998, this was repurposed and found to be an effective agent for treating the comprehensive symptoms associated with the leprosy. And it was approved in 1998 for the leprosy treatment. And in 2006, and it was again repurposed as a treatment for multiple myeloma, which is a kind of a tumor. So this kind of drug repurposing has given you new properties for the old drugs. And another one of the important molecule that has to be shown here is sildenafil, that we all know. Like in 1985, it was approved as an investigated by Pfizer as an antihypertensive drug for the BP and all. And later on, the Pfizer has found that it was not so much effective and has some other side effect, like as you say, adverse reaction, like has a erection kind of thing. So in 1998, the Pfizer has finally repurposed the drug, like it's an antihypertensive drug, as modified as an useful approach therapy for the erectile dysfunction, and also released in the brand name of Viagra. And later on in 2005, it was also approved for the pulmonary hypertension treatment in the 2005. So drug repurposing has proven to be a very efficient and good way of finding new properties for the existing drugs. So as I said, like in the clinical development, it has a 4 phases as discussed by Dr. Eric. And first few phases, like the phase 1 is mainly focused on identifying its safety in humans. And later on it was found to be non-toxic to the humans. And later on it was found in multi-center trials in the large number of patients to found its efficiency. So the clinical trials on repurposed drugs. So as I said, like if you want to investigate a new property for the existing drugs, it has not to be done like so much rigorous back to the stage. It can start somewhere in the phase 2 to identify its efficiency in the phase 2, because the existing drugs already proven safe in the human use in the phase 1 and all the phases. So these drugs which are supposed to be repurposed for the new use can directly enter into phase 2 or phase 3 to show its efficiency and safety in the phase 3 and trials, and then directly can enter into the phase 4. So this kind of approach can shorten the time the drug can enter into the market for the new uses. So something such as a pandemic situation, something like a coronavirus. So we don't have the time like 10 to 15 years of developing a new drug from beginning. So the drug repurposing is the one of the good approach during this pandemic to get a approval of new therapies for the antiviral drugs, directly enter into the phase 2 and phase 3 trials using this repurposing approach. So The history of infectious disease is something like we are coming up every time, like from several decades, with a new infectious disease every 5 to 10 years, a gap. So it starts with something like in 1890s, like diphtheria, tetanus infections, and later on rheumatic fever, and then followed by scarlet fever and Spanish flu and pneumonia and chicken pox, and later on we found anthrax. And so this is rabies and Ebola in 1976, and then SARS in very recently, like MERS in 2003 and 2012, and even the avian flu in 2003, and very recently like Ebola in 2013, and at the end, like we got a coronavirus in 2019, like end of the 2019, like December. So this kind of infections are something like we have to be get ready with those approach to combat these infections. So, and this coronavirus emerged as a something like so this was like initially found identified in China in the 2019 end of the year, and it was found to be more aggressive and reached across all the globe, and has affected more than 23 million cases in the worldwide, and has emerged as a pandemic. And as you can see, like it has reached almost entire world and infecting like several places and a very great number. Like, so this is very difficult to control these pandemic situations. So the common symptoms that SARS-CoV-2 has been reported to have a fever and tiredness, and a continuous cough with a loss of taste or smell in some cases, and breathing difficulties mainly in the lung system. So if you look at the SARS-CoV-2, like severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, this is a kind of RNA virus which has structurally found to have some surface protein, something like M protein and hemoglobin esterase dimer and viral envelope, and it has a RNA nuclear protein like here. So once it has a interaction with our human body, like in the human cell, so this virus uses a cell receptor like ACE2 receptor, enter into the human cell, and once after viral entry, it is to be uncoated, and then virus releases its RNA into the human cell, and where it gets translated, and then it's got replication and in the human, and then get structural proteins are translated, and then it forms a viral assembly and releases the virus release into the out, and it get replicated in the human cells. So once it get replicated in the human cells, so it has reach out to have several effects on uh, mainly the lungs, and producing acute respiratory syndrome and pneumonia kind of symptoms. And mainly it is like as expected shortness of breath or breathing difficulties, and it has found to have a cough or sore throat and fatigue, and it has also have some effects on the central nervous system, affecting its causing the stroke and seizures, encephalopathies, and the fever and headache, and these kind of dizziness. So these symptoms are observed and vary from patient to patient, and some cases are already reported to be asymptomatic. Even the person has tested positive for coronavirus. Some human beings are having no symptoms, like asymptomatic coronavirus is very dangerous, and it leads to spread of virus very easily. So as I said, like some people are in India back now, like they are using more sophisticated testing on lungs, looking for the pneumonia kind of images in their lungs can reveal the existence of the virus. So even if the person has no not tested positive in the normal testing, but they still can host the virus at some levels which are not detected by the testing system. So this is the normal structure of our human lungs, which has started with trachea, and then it has a main bronchi, and the lungs has a main structural unit which is alveoli, which is the main source for our structural component of the lungs for vital organ, for the respiratory exchange of oxygen for the bloodstream. So this is in the healthy cases, the blood vessels like alveoli is in close contact with the blood vessel, and the air will change the. I cannot play the video. Uh, so in the healthy patients, the air coming in the alveoli close contact with the bloodstream, and then it is a very thin membrane. It easily exchanges oxygen and also takes the carbon dioxide from the blood. But when it comes to the infected patients, so it gets more and more thicker alveoli, which is very difficult for the air in close contact with the blood, and very difficult to get the absorption of the main oxygen supply for the body. So that's why we get a very severe respiratory attacks on the coronavirus. So as I said, like the developing a new drug targets, identifying a new heat, and identifying those targets for the new drug development, and it takes several years. So in an attempt to identify druggable targets, there are some group published very recently in July. They have isolated complete proteome of the SARS-CoV-2, and then the recombinant proteins of the SARS-CoV-2 are expressed in human cell lines, and then they try to do a affinity purification to identify its interactions with the human proteins. So they could identify 332 high confidence protein-protein interactions, so between the SARS-CoV-2 and human proteins. So among these identified hits, they got around 66 druggable human proteins in the host, which can be targeted by 69 compounds already reported, like of which 29 drugs are approved by US FDA already, and 12 are in clinical trials, 28 are in preclinical compounds. So these further studies has to be done on these targets and the compounds, their efficacy, and all those things in the in vitro, and as well as to be tested in human being. So this is a snapshot of those study results. They could identify several druggable targets as mentioned here, and also indicates the drug which can be suitable for the targeting those targets. So the green ones are the compounds which are already approved by US FDA, and some of them are in the development stage. So however, it takes several time for developing a new approval for these approach. So before that, like I would try to show you the strategies that we can use for combating the SARS-CoV-2 using the advanced known technology, what we have information about the SARS-CoV-2 and its genome availability, and already previous information along with the SARS and MERS, which are of same family of viruses. So as I said, like a virus uses cell surface proteins for its internalization, and so here what we can do, we can use blocking the virus entry using antibody approach, or we can use inhibitors for TMPRSS2 receptor, so that the virus cannot enter into the human cells, cannot interact with the human cells. In the next phase, like after internalization, the virus releases its components into the human cell, and then it gets translated, get amplified by the human proteins, and then later on these proteins will be translated into the viral proteins, which will be assembled into its virus, separate new virus. So here the immature virus can be blocked here. So another approach for blocking the viral replication is targeting it's a RDBP, RNA dependent, replication dependent RNA polymerase that is used for its amplification in the human. So, and there are viral protease inhibitors that can be tested here for stopping its replication in the human cells. And at the another level, that what we can use is innate immune response, like our immunity levels can be activated using several interferons or cytokines boosting. Or another approach is like using the enhancers of antiviral innate immunity, such as like interferon inducers or blocking of interferon antagonist, so that it can have a doesn't have a cytokine storm into the human reactions. So I will be talking some of the approaches that are widely used using the drug repurposing approach, as well as which are found to be effective in the SARS-CoV-2 treatment. So the first one is prone positioning. This is these two widely supportive treatments that are helping COVID-19 patients greatly during these pandemic situations. So one of such supportive treatment is prone positioning. So this one is generally we use the patient in face up position using the ventilation system, so that heart and lungs are something like this. But it was found that if you are tilting the position, like lying the patient on his belly, can increase open up the lungs and can take up more oxygen supply to the patient. So this kind of simple changing in the patient position can help greatly in the found to be very useful in the COVID-19 patients, giving more oxygen supply for the treatment. And another life-saving supportive treatment that was in approval was using ventilators, providing a oxygen supply and respiratory support devices are useful in the situations. So these kind of ventilators and mechanical respiratory devices, they provide the supply, like delivers the breath in a positive pressure, so that the patient always have a positive pressure in the when he exhales. And also in the controlled breathing, like the machine completely delivers a scheduled breath every it is a scheduled monitor way. So this breathing is like and the ventilators is very important, and this is can take up more pressure in the can lead to damage of the lungs. So the patients have to be must constantly monitor during the ventilation therapy. So one of the drug that I will be talking is RDRP inhibitors. So RNA dependent RNA polymerase enzyme, which is used for viral replication in the host cell. So there are three antiviral drugs that are being used from this class. So these RDRP are already approved earlier, like remdesivir and favipiravir and ribavirin. So these are already approved earlier for something like Ebola virus and influenza virus previously. And ribavirin was used for hepatitis C and other respiratory viral symptoms. So these molecules have done in very good, found to be effective in vitro, as well as several clinical trials have proven more efficiency of these molecules. And then this was found to be one of the more promising evidence in the recent studies that these RDRP inhibitors can be used as an efficient therapy for SARS-CoV-2. So generally this remdesivir and this class of RDRP inhibitors, as I said, the once the SARS-CoV-2 enters like internalized into the human cells, this RDRP like RNA dependent RNA polymerase is required for its replication in the human cells. So once we use the remdesivir, which is a prodrug, which can be converted into active moiety in the human cells, that is GS441524, can directly bind to RDRP and block its activity, so that the viral proteins cannot be replicated in the human cells. so that we have stopped the viral replication and its propagation in the human system. And this was the one of the clinical trials which has been done in a large number of patients, and which was published in New England Journal of Medicine very recently. So this was found when they have cumulative recoveries compared to placebo, which is no drug, and compared to the group which has taken the remdesivir. So this is overall, it has a better surveillance compared to the placebo, good recovery rate compared to the no treatment conditions. And there are this kind of when they compare the patients with non-receiving oxygen condition, there was not much strong evidence for the remdesivir activity in these kind of patients, but it was found very effective in patients which are who are receiving oxygen supply. So this remdesivir acts very great in those patients, found to be more effective and efficient in these kind of conditions compared to the no treatment control. So we need a large number of clinical trials to found to estimate the efficiency and safety of these trials. So when it comes to the corticosteroids, another class of promising therapeutics that are in use, dexamethasone is one of the corticosteroid which is previously widely used for its effect on allergies, asthma, and inflammation. Is found to be one of the more important candidate as a drug repurposing approach in this pandemic. So generally, dexamethasone is treatment is recommended by NIH and in the UK, National Health Services in the UK, and NIH in the US for patients in COVID-19 and who are mechanically ventilated or who require supplemental oxygen but are not mechanically ventilated. So patients who are supplemented with oxygen, they have good results with the dexamethasone, but it was not found very good candidate who are not mechanically ventilated. So this has to be very carefully observed, and dexamethasone is not recommended in patients with COVID-19 who do not require supplemental oxygen or hospitalization. Like this is not good to take in the normal patients who are not so much symptomatic. So another compound of interest that I was talking about, desoxanide, which is a kind of prodrug, which can again converts into desoxanide in the human body. This is an active metabolite of NTZ. So this was found to be a good candidate for the drug repurposing approach because this molecule has found to suppress the inflammatory cytokines and also relax the airway muscles, and in vitro broad spectrum antiviral activity against several classes of virus like coronavirus, like SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV, influenza virus, and HBV, HIV, Ebola. So this molecule has found to be effective against different classes of virus. So this was proposed as a efficient anti-SARS-CoV-2 treatment. So they have tested in vitro in the cell lines and they found, yes, it inhibits the SARS-CoV-2 replication in the human cells. So now the next step is to use this compound in the clinical trials. And there are several clinical trials already registered and recruiting patients for studying its efficiency in alone or in combination with other therapeutic molecules. So another class of molecule that I was talking about is viral entry inhibitors. So which are have found to be mixed evidence. Like they have some of them found to be effective in some cases and found like ineffective in some other places. So these viral entry inhibitors are drugs that inhibit the entry of viruses into host cells. So one of such molecule is umifenovir, that is Arbidol, like also pharma standard. So prevents the fusion of viral protein with the target cells, thereby preventing the entry of virus into cells. So it shows very desirable effect against the influenza virus. So this was approved only for the influenza in Russia and China. So this was tested against SARS-CoV-2 in vitro and has shown to inhibit virus at a very micromolar concentration and showed encouraging results in clinical trial. but it has lead to have more phase 4 trials, and in the phase 3 trials has to be done in like in large number of patients to approve this drug. Another one, like the study, as I said, this was a mixed evidence. So one of the study found to be like this was not associated with any improved outcomes in patients with coronavirus in a very recent study. So some studies have showed its efficiency, some studies have reported it was not showing any efficiency in some of the patients. So these kind of drugs, like using these mixed evidence drugs, is like should be very careful. And another approach that was recently coming up is convalescent serum or plasma therapy for COVID-19. So generally, as I said, like the donor is the person who recovered from COVID-19, has no symptoms like more than 14 days, and having a high antibody titer in his body against the SARS-CoV-2. So generally what we will take his blood, and then we isolate the plasma without any blood cells from in the blood, and then we isolate the clear liquid that we call as convalescent plasma. So once you use this plasma in healthy human beings, so these patients with no previous exposure to SARS-CoV-2 receiving this plasma, and then once this person, if has exposure to SARS-CoV-2, upon exposure, the antibodies in his body will neutralize the virus, and then it will prevent the disease. So this is generally used as this CP therapy can be used as a prophylaxis treatment approach. And there is another way of using is like therapy progression. So the treatment is like if we use the CP for patients who are already exposed to plasma at a level where it is not so extreme. So this found to be neutralize the virus in the person who are already exposed to virus, and then it will clear the infection with a sooner time. So this approach was found to be which was coming up, like it was not something new, but this plasma therapy can be a good approach for during this pandemic situation. And several states in India as well got the regulatory permissions for using this plasma therapy as a treatment approach for COVID-19. And another approach that was that using monoclonal or polyclonal antibodies. So these results also have mixed evidences in the studies reported. So generally the monoclonal antibodies, like we call as MABs, so are generally first developed in 1970s, and it was approved, FDA is almost approved for the MABs for 79 diseases ranging from cancer to AIDS. So generally, as I said, the convalescent plasma from people who recovered from COVID-19 have mix of antibodies. So companies like Eli Lilly and Regeneron recently began the clinical trial studying the monoclonal antibodies against the SARS-CoV-2. So there are two monoclonal antibodies that was namely Serelumab and Tocilizumab are the best tested for their efficiency and safety in COVID-19 patients. So both of these MABs were approved, like it was expressed in against the lung inflammation induced by interleukin-6, and this was also for against IL-6 receptor, and it was used for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis and conditions. So these monoclonal antibodies can be repurposed for the use against SARS-CoV-2 treatment in the humans in this pandemic situation. And the several studies have reported some efficiency in the phase 2 studies, and some large number of phase 3 trials has to be conducted to test their efficiency and then approval for these molecules for COVID-19. And another immune boosters are like interferons and also cytokine inhibitors. So they're also found to be have mixed evidences from different parts of world. So generally these interferons are molecules that are naturally produced in response to virus. So they have very profound effect on immune system and attacking like invaders, so to avoid the damaging to the body's own tissues. So injecting the synthetic interferons is now a standard treatment for a number of immune disorders. Example is like Rebif. This is prescribed for multiple sclerosis. So there is an open label study in China suggested that molecules like could prevent the healthy people from getting infected with the SARS-CoV-2. And in come to the cytokines, like the body produces these signaling molecules called cytokines to fight the diseases, but manufactured in excess, like cytokines can trigger the immune system to wildly overreact to infections in a process sometimes called cytokine storm. So this is what happening during the SARS-CoV-2 exposure. So our sometimes body reacts like overreacted and then produces a lot of cytokines. So cytokine inhibitors can prove effective against arthritis and other inflammatory disorders. So these CIs can be uh, trials are remain underway, and several studies are taking place for identifying the cytokines inhibitors as a repurposing approach for treating the COVID-19. So another molecule that I was should be talking about today is like phenolene derivatives. So these were not at all promising show to be in COVID-19. So as we all know, it was in the news like in the March and April time that chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, which are our Indian origin drugs, found to be effective against SARS-CoV-2, and was recommended uh, by US FDA like emergency use authorization case. So this chloroquine was approved in 1930s as a drug against malaria, and there is a less toxic version that hydroxychloroquine, which was invented in 1946, was approved for other diseases such as lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. So owing the inefficiency of this HCQ and CQ in various clinical trials, FDA recently revoked the EUA, that is emergency use authorization of these both the drugs, and stated that potential benefits of these drugs in treating COVID-19 do not overweigh their unknown adverse effects. So these drugs were based on the EUA, like emergency use authorization of these drugs. There are several studies, like more than 100 clinical trials were initiated in different parts of the world using this chloroquine and in HCQ in alone or in combination with other drugs. And once the FDA revoked the EU emergency use authorization of these drugs, some studies were stopping those clinical trials, and some studies still continuing with its clinical trials with some limited number of patients. And another class of drugs which are thought to be repurposed for COVID-19 and found to be ineffective, those are not promising at all. So these protease inhibitors such as ritonavir and lopinavir and darunavir, so these are found like synthetic drugs that inhibit the HIV-1 protease, which cleaves the precursor proteins into smaller fragments that are required for viral growth and infectivity and replication. So these protease inhibitors bind to the active site of protease enzyme and then prevent the maturation of newly produced virions so that they remain non-infectious. So these were approved for the HIV infections, but thought of these drugs can be repurposed in the COVID-19, but found to be ineffective in several trials. So generally, these molecules found to inhibit the protease, which cleaves those HIV proteins and makes viral stop the replication of the virus. And when it comes to the herbal drugs, it was like as we know, the herbal drugs doesn't have a very clinical evidence for their usage, but several traditional Chinese medicines like herbal formulations are found to be active in previous versions of the virus like SARS and H1N1 viruses. So there are several studies have initiated, and based on the systemic historical records, 28 traditional medicines and that can prevent the COVID-19 were identified, and out of them 26 were already government issued Chinese guidelines and 2 were issued by Korean guidelines. So according to Chinese guidelines, like there are some drugs like list of drugs such as Wangi and Feng Tuang and then Beiju and then Liangko, and there are several other drugs have been found to be frequently used for the symptomatic and antiviral treatments that can be tested for COVID-19. So they can be repurposed for COVID-19 as well. However, we need extensive clinical trials are required to establish the safety and efficiency. in those traditional medications on humans. So based on from all these my presentation, I would like to conclude few things. This SARS-CoV-2 was found a pandemic which is growing rampant across the borders, and due to the health emergency around the world, so the lack of vaccine as well as suitable treatment for the disease, so the situation is getting more and more worse. So the ongoing research is only completely relies on few things, like one is developing a suitable diagnostic technique so that we can accurately detect the virus in early stages of the infection, so that we can take the precautions and then try to do standard precautions to do its application. And the second approach is to there are a number of vaccine candidates that I said previously by Dr. Eric and Mr. Purushottam, that there are several studies are underway testing their vaccines in the laboratories, as well as several pharma companies coming up that is in clinical trial phases, like phase 3 trials are running on. So meanwhile, the clinical trials carried out already approved drugs for the repurposing for the COVID-19 yielded mixed results in some studies, and some antiviral drugs such as remdesivir and favipiravir are found to be more promising and found working as a magic kind of stuff in the COVID-19 situations. So however, we need more and more evidences for establishing those therapy for COVID-19, but still we need a multi-center clinical trials and large number of patients around the world to get a suitable and approval vaccination for the COVID-19 treatment approach. So this is a way how one can prevent catching and spreading the virus. Take hand hygiene as well as use a cloth to mask your nose and mouth, and don't throw your tissues in separately, and then avoid touching your face and nose with unwashed hands, and avoid close contact with people who are unwell. So this is the best way to be away from the catching virus from your spreading the virus. So I would like to thank you all the participants of the today's webinar, and also I would like to thank Principal Dr. V. Anantalakshmi Garu and Vice Principal Ms. Y. Padmaja Garu, and Webinar Organizing Secretary Dr. Elia for giving this opportunity and to be one of the part of this today's international webinar. And I would like to take any questions if you have.
Dr. Upender?
Yeah.
Dr. Upender?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining in the early hours there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. It is very impressive. Lucid also in style. Very lucid. Very simple language to understand.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any prediction from scientists about this COVID, when it is going to end?
As such, we don't have a prediction, sir, but it still goes on. We are coming up with new variants of the virus, found to be in different parts of the world. Even in India, we have found some mutations in the virus which are coming up. So it's not something we are going to end up with this condition, but we have to be taking care of this situation like that.
Yeah.
But because getting a treatment and therapy, it takes several, at least for the repurposing approach, at least we need at least 1 or 2 years for found to be its efficacy in the phase 3 trials. So at least it takes 1 or 2 years for approving the drug. But still, people are using the standard antiviral drugs like remdesivir and found to be more efficient. And people are also using anticoagulants along with the supplemental therapy, as corticosteroids are found to be more and more life-saving drugs actually during situations.
Yeah, thank you. So even scientists are not able to predict when it is going to end.
No, it's not in our hand. It's all in the virus, how it is going to.
Yeah. In spite of this intense research, we are not able to predict.
Yeah, people are trying to develop, as I said, there are some studies are coming up with identifying the druggable targets and all, but still we need to test them in the lab and in the humans so that they found to be efficient and safety. the regulatory process like is so long that it takes few years to approve a drug. So that's what we need to worry about.
Yeah, here there is a question in the chat box.
Yeah.
I think this is for Dr. Eric. Question is from Sharon Pradhan.
Okay.
During trial procedure, if the volunteer starts showing critical symptoms during phase 1, then whether that newly formed drug will be discouraged or whether it will continue into phase 2.
No,
Yes, it
not
will be
continue.
discouraged.
It will
No,
be
no, no.
discouraged.
Upender, so she was asking if there are some critical symptoms shown by a participant in phase 1 trial, whether the trial will be continued or not. Firstly, it will depend on the severity of the incident and also occurrence, like, out of certain, let's say out of 100 participants, how many of them are getting it? And is it particular to a certain population? Like, some patients could be vulnerable or some races could be more prone to an interaction or an event more than others. So is it in a specific individual or a specific type of subject, or is it across the board? And if it is determined to be across the board and if it is an unexpected severe event, yes, at any stage, whether it is at phase 1, phase 2 or phase 3, the drug will be discouraged. There are out of 1,000 drugs that enter into phase 1, only a few of them will get to phase 2.
Yeah, I hope the question is answered. Or if participants have some more questions, just one or two, you can just unmute and then ask.
So there is one question that says, as of now, many claim to have come out with the vaccine. How do we authenticate?
Yeah.
So the only way to authenticate is not to trust YouTube, not to trust any other platform, just to rely on the information announced by healthcare authorities. For example, in India, we have Center for Drug Standard Control Organization, CDSCO. So if we hear any announcement or approval from them, yes, it is trustworthy. And also in US, if you hear from US FDA, or in Europe, EMA, in Brazil, ANVISA, likewise, every country has their own healthcare authority. So that's the only source of authentication.
Yeah, thank you very much, Upender. We will now go ahead with the next part of our webinar.
Sure. Thank you.
Sir, good evening, sir. Can I ask a question, please?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. The thing is that right now we are having that COVID-19. Different strains are there. In future, may we expect different types of the same type? I mean, say the mutants of it.
Yeah. Even we have mutants, but it was not so stronger changes in the protein structure or something. So they will
Yes,
be
sir.
having a common domain in the protein that can be targeted. Something like RDRP inhibitors can inhibit the protein like moiety. So if one or two residues like point mutations can affect. So those can be affect.
Again, vital.
Yeah.
They may be vital in future also.
Yeah.
That's what my prediction is, that right now we are not having any problem with the. I mean, say so far this is somewhat. This will be stable in few years. But what happens again after that particular period of time? Again, some more viruses can be generated,
Sure.
maybe through the mutants or like that.
That's for sure, because this SARS-CoV-2 is one of the variant from the emerged from the SARS-CoV virus, which was in 2003. So this was
Yes, sir.
yeah. So
That's what.
we are expecting to be getting new viruses soon, but we have to get ready with that.
So with all these types of different developments around the world, how long can it be taken for a vaccine? Any polyvalent type of vaccine can be generated.
Yeah, there are several.
Is there any possibility for a polyvalent?
Yeah, there are more than 100 candidates already in the studies for the vaccines across the globe. There are several companies are doing those studies. So we have to wait and see the results from those studies and see what kind of safe vaccines can come up into the market.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question there, sir. And Dr. Upender, thank you so much. I look forward working with you.
Sure, sir.
And because you are saying that you are going to be back in motherland
Sure, soon.
to do service to the motherland. I like that attitude, and all the best in all your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Such an young age you are there as postdoc in US.
Thank you, sir.
All the best for you. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
I hope you would stay till the end of this webinar.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
Now my friend Purushottam, he has got a big task to do.